Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today we'll be pruning an elderberry, and the first thing I want to comment on is this is about 1 month later than we pruned this elderberry last year. The good news is I kept the before and after picture for last year, so in a moment I'll show you the after of what it looked like when we finished pruning in early 2021. But the reason we're so much later this year is that our fall and into December was quite warm. And so in December, this elderberry still had leaves on it. And when a tree or a shrub goes dormant, it's not like a light switch. It doesn't just turn off and go dormant. It takes a good 3 weeks of cold for the plant to be convinced that it's time to go dormant. So as it turns out, on New Year's Day, 2022, this year, here in Knoxville, we set an all-time record high temperature of 77 degrees. Overnight, a cold front came through, temperature dropped to 50 degrees, and January was a really cold month. So it took most of January for the trees and shrubs to be convinced to go dormant. As a result, here it is now, February 1, and I'm now pruning the elderberry. And my notes indicate that last year I pruned this same shrub on January 6th. So we're a good 3 weeks later, 1st of February. So let me step out of the picture and let you get a better shot of this. As I say, I'll show you the after from last year's pruning so you can see how much this thing grows. Again, its height is back up to 10 feet. I never do a topping. When you'll see the elderberry is one of the easier things to prune because most of your cuts are just made at the ground level. So let me step out of the picture for a moment, show you my tools that I'll be using, and then we'll get to the pruning job. It'll be pretty quick. Okay, so here in the ground, you see what I'm going to be using today. One is a kneeling pad, just because the ground is still kind of damp, and especially it's a little cool. My bottle of spray Lysol, which I have used to disinfect my 3 tools today. My little hand pruners, which will go back in my holster. The long-handled loppers, which I may or may not need today. And then my folding saw, which I will use to take off some of the larger branches. So let me put this thing back in focus and we will get started. And I will focus primarily on the base of the plant since that's where most of the pruning will be done. The first thing I'm going to do though is take my loppers, and one of the things that has happened this past year is I have a whole bunch of shoots coming up further away from the base than I would like. So I'm going to walk in, grab the pruners, and take out those things that are popping up a little further away from the clump than I would like. I'm on the back side here, and you can see probably some of these things through the rest of the foliage. But I'm just going to take those right off at the ground level. I'll make a little pile of those. Because as you can see, I have lawn here, and I really don't want those things coming out into the lawn. I got a couple over here. And as we discussed last year, the elderberry is a cane shrub. So it likes to put out lots of canes. It will put out lots of canes. And you get to choose which ones stay and which ones get to go. The other thing that I do is anything that's really spindly. You know, this one out here not only is a little further from the clump than I would like, but it's also too skinny. It's not really going to amount to anything. Because, again, remember that the elderberry puts on all this growth in the first year. The second year bears fruit, and sometimes bears fruit in the third year. So these really puny little things are never really going to get big enough to support fruit. So I think I've got most of those out of there. We may find another one or two as we go that we want to take out. So those are the little ones. Then I want to come around and show you one of the things I did last year. In keeping with the fact, oops, here's one. The little spindly ones you'll keep finding throughout. When you find them in the summer, take them out in the summer. But I don't know if you can see, but there are some canes in here that I put little pieces of the green plastic plant ties. Those are canes that bore fruit last year. So last year they were at least a second-year cane, possibly a third-year cane. So what I'm going to do is to take out the biggest one of those that has tape on it, and if it's a smaller one like this one, I might let that go and see if in fact it'll bear fruit on a third year. But for instance, this big fat one here is an older cane, as is this one in here. You can start to tell after a couple years which are the newer canes and which are the older canes. So what we're trying to do, if in fact you're growing elderberries for the fruit, you always want to get rid of the biggest, oldest canes, and they just look different. They have more spots, more scaly type bark than the younger ones, and they have a bigger diameter. So now I'm going to get my annealing pad and my folding saw and take out a couple of the bigger, older canes. If you watched last year's video, I took out a total of 3 of those, and I will probably have another 3, maybe 4 this year to take out. And when you take them out of the ground, you don't have to make all these multiple cuts. You just whale away with your folding saw, and I won't make you watch all that, but I will point out which ones I'm going to cut. One of the challenges is that being a cane shrub, they often do start to cross. So here's a much younger cane. It's growing very close to this big old one that I want to take out. So this one may be a little bit of a challenge for me to get, but we're going to make the best cut we possibly can, and that's the best you can do. Okay, I have taken out 4 large stems. Let me scroll around here and show you what they look like. There's the first one, second one, third one, fourth one. Those are each, easily 2 inches in diameter and probably 8 to 10 feet long. They all had the green plastic tape on them, so they had already borne fruit. Now, here's what we have left. And now I'll do a little bit more cleanup because I've got one in particular that is just leaning out to the left, which you can see here. So I'm going to take that one out because it really should be standing up straight. Okay, so now I've taken out 5 major stems. They all had green tape on them, so I know that they all bore fruit last year. And the final step is just to do a little bit of touch up. So I'm going to go in closer with my hand pruners and see if there's anything dead or damaged. This time of year it's kind of hard to tell because there are no leaves, but if you just bend a branch and it snaps, well, then it was dead. If it bends, well, it's still green. So let me come in with my pruners, get some things out of the way. And for instance, this at the end, we'll see if you can hear it. It did break off, but that is the stem of where a cluster of fruit were, and where the before fruit are actually the flowers. That big umbrella, the umbel, is attached on the tips. So all your fruits are up around the top. And the other interesting thing about elderberry is that while some trees and shrubs have an alternate structure where you have a stem comes out here and then the next stem comes out here, next stem comes out here, they alternate, you will notice on the elderberry they are opposite, directly opposite. So here are two stems coming out, and that's where the umbel was last year. So those can all come off if you feel like doing that. Most of the time they just fall off. But the elderberry is one of those examples where the structure is opposite. Here's a larger branch that gives you a really good view of, here's the main stem, and these two branches come off directly opposite each other. These could come off directly opposite. These two directly opposite. And then when we finally get out to the end, looks like most of the umbels there have already fallen off. So that's the last thing we want to do, is just kind of come around and, okay, so here's one more little spindly one. I'm down to hand pruners to take that off. This one is a maybe. Yeah, you can hear crack, crack. Okay, this one wants to cross back in, so we'll take that off. This is really just the final cleanup. This little branch here is likely to whack me in the face when I mow, so we'll take that off. Likewise with this one. Plus I see there's a new bud starting in there. So this last step is really, here's a good one. I'm sure you heard that one crack. You can see them, and then, nope, that one doesn't want to give. Yep. Clean up that a little better. And a lot of times, if the one side is dead, the other side is probably dead. Those alternate pairs. So now, you know, this looks more like the cane shrub that was in the after picture last year, but this one is the 2022 after picture. So when you come out to do your elderberries, they really are a pretty quick job. I've got a very small pile of those little shoots that were coming up too far away. I have a nice pile that I'm going to have to cut up into smaller pieces to dispose of. I've got some things. Well, they're not really crossing, they're not rubbing, so I'm going to let those go. And I think, what am I going to do with that? Sometimes you just need to reposition them, and then they'll grow where you want them. So if they're starting to cross, you can often uncross them and get them to straighten up and grow right. Here's a... Okay, so there's the first pruning video of 2022. We're finished with our little elderberry, and I'm looking forward to a great harvest of berries again this year. I will probably net them to keep the birds out so I get a few more fruit. Birds had a good feast last year. Fortunately, I have a few more elderberry bushes, so I don't mind sharing with the birds. So that's how you prune an elderberry bush. You're never taking a hedge trimmer. It's a cane shrub. Never take a hedge trimmer. You're not topping it. let it be 10 feet tall, let the birds have the fruits at the top. Your job is to come in and take out the biggest, oldest canes because they won't be fruit bearing anymore. Thin it out, get rid of anything dead, diseased, damaged, or dysfunctional. Don't let it whack you in the face. Elderberries are one of the easiest things to prune, and the general time frame is January to mid-February. We made it, but we were later this year than last year just because the first part of winter wasn't very cold and it didn't go dormant until January. So there we go. Thank you for joining us.